Great. There we go. All right, folks. Well, wonderful to see everyone here. Again, I'm Timothy Yee, and since we are recording this, I'm Timothy Yee with Green Retirement. I'm a registered principal offering securities and advisory services through Independent Financial Group, LLC, IFG of San Diego, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor. Member FINRA, SIPC, Hartford Funds. Green Retirement and IFG are unaffiliated entities. We're not discussing investments today, but past performance is no guaranteed future results. I heard this presentation, folks. Speaking of IFG, I heard this at the home office back in August. We had our annual gathering, and Dennis, your colleague John, presented. And considering the poor fellow was after lunch, which is not an enviable spot, after lunch or right before happy hour, John had us enthralled, and I couldn't stop taking notes. And I knew for First Friday 401k, I had to bring this out. So Dennis is with the Hartford Group. He's going to share some insights about how to retain your brain, some practical tips. And I'm embarrassed to say some of them I'm not doing, but I will resolve to get to bed earlier, but sometimes that Kindle just sneaks up onto my bed, and then I have to read a few more pages, and oh my God, it's 11 o'clock, and that's not good. I know, guilty. Anyway, Dennis, take us away. You should be able to share screen. Rose is hosting the meeting, so any technical stuff she'll handle.
All right. Well,
Dennis.
good afternoon, everyone. Or actually, it's good afternoon here on the East Coast. Maybe good morning to you. But thank you for joining us today for our presentation of Retain Your Brain. And again, thanks to Timothy for inviting me here to speak. Let me just take a moment and share my screen and make sure we're all seeing it. Look good? All
On
right.
my side.
So we'll start with the question, can your brain get younger? Right? We've had some incredible studies done. Researchers took folks and put them in an MRI scan and took a look at their brains. Then some of those participants implemented key lifestyle changes that were recommended. And follow-up brain scans taken anywhere from 6 months to a year later revealed that their brains looked younger than they did before. So is this as if the participants in the experimental group had their brains in a time machine, essentially? So it's understandable that we're desperate for a quick fix to one of the greatest collective health fears that we have, which is losing your memory or having your mind go from a high-functioning piece of biological wizardry to a lump of gray matter that struggles to remember what day it is. And by the way, when I say wizardry, I'm not exaggerating. A healthy brain is an amazing thing. It can effectively learn, remember, manage emotions, analyze, make good decisions, create, innovate, on and on. So, a healthy brain can even let you do the electric slide when you think about it. And it could also help you laugh at the people doing the electric slide. So it can help you navigate and hit the perfect golf shot, although it hasn't helped me do that yet. But what it boils down to is that a well-functioning brain is essential for you being the best version of you. But the incidence of cognitive disease in the United States is on the rise, as many of you may well know. Kind of a rhetorical question here. I don't need to see your hands or anything, but has anyone here had a family member who's dealt with dementia or some other form of cognitive disease, right? Probably quite a few of us. I personally have. My grandmother suffered from dementia in her later years, and it was hard to watch someone who I knew was sharp and independent spend the last few years of her life under 24-hour care. But another question to pose is, to those of you that have had family members with dementia, do you think that you're at greater risk due to that genetic connection? Or another question, who on the call believes that genetics is the #1 cause of Alzheimer's disease? So I'll answer all those questions in a minute, but first let's meet our partner in developing this content. So here is Dr. Mark Milstein. He is a leading scientific researcher on neuroscience, health, and happiness. Those are his focuses. And his insights provide us science-based solutions to keep the brain healthy and boost productivity and maximize longevity. In fact, Dr. Milstein wrote a book called The Age-Proof Brain, which delves deeper into those insights, just for your information, so it's out there. But let's hear from him. What does he say? He says, we have strong evidence that simple lifestyle interventions can dramatically improve brain health and lower the risk of disease today, tomorrow, and in the future. So I mentioned those two questions from before, so let me just touch on those. The first was, who thinks they're at greater risk due to greater risk for disease due to that genetic connection in the family? And I would say that I certainly used to, but the answer is an emphatic no. Actually, a 2019 Alzheimer's study found that certain lifestyle factors have a greater impact than genetics. And a 2020 study from the Rush Medical Center in Chicago found that those who followed recommendations for lifestyle modifications reduced their risk of developing Alzheimer's by nearly 60%. So that's a huge number. And the
Excuse me, Dennis.
Yes, go, please.
Can we ask questions as you go along? Because I had my hand raised and I have a question.
Oh, I didn't see the hand raised, but sure, yeah, I'm more than willing to have it be an interactive experience.
Okay. I was just wondering, in terms of the study, do they have age bands and in terms of because then in terms of lifestyle interventions, how effective it is if you're in your 60s, if you're in your 50s, or do we go as young as the 40s and 30s? So you might be addressing it later. I just wanted to bring it up as a question.
No, we can address it now. We do touch on it later to a certain extent, but I'll go back to that original study that I was talking about with the MRIs, right? That group, that focus group of people that they scanned through the MRI and then gave them those lifestyle factor changes. It was a diverse group of ages. So depending on how old you are, really, or I shouldn't say doesn't depend on how old you are. These effects, these positive effects that we're going to talk about can be done ideally when you're 20, 30, 40, as soon as possible in your life when you implement them. But even in an older age, you can change you can make those lifestyle changes and still see positive effects. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I would have liked to see like age banding, but that's fine. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, Dennis, do you have the study later on, like in a footnote or something where I can get it and then send it out?
Yes. What I could do is, show you the slides which have all of the notes in it and the footnoting for where the studies come from, if that's helpful.
Excellent. Yeah, Rose is an engineer, so she has a lot of sharp questions.
Yeah, I'm sure. And keep them coming, Rose. And if I can't answer them, here's the question. Here's what I tell everyone, right? So, I'm not personally a doctor, so I don't have maybe the extensive information that Dr. Milstein would have, but we do have direct contact with Dr. Milstein. We work with him very closely. So any questions that come our way that we can answer live, we make sure to get the answers, okay? All right. But I did touch on a second question, and that other question was, who thinks genetics is the #1 determining factor of Alzheimer's? And usually when I'm in a in-person setting, a lot of hands go up on that one as well. But the truth is only about 5% of Alzheimer's cases are strictly genetic. And those cases present themselves as what I think we refer to or is commonly known as early onset Alzheimer's. So the other way to look at that stat is that means 95% of Alzheimer's cases are based on other factors than genetics. And those are mainly lifestyle factors. So, and keep in mind as we move through the slides, because again, to my point earlier that I'm not a doctor, so this isn't supposed to be a substitution for the advice of a doctor, but rather it's designed for awareness. So hopefully it's just a nudge in the right direction. So let's begin with what we'll discuss. Here are the 3 areas. We talk about your age versus your brain's age, the importance of brain health, and how to age-proof your brain. So let's talk about your age versus your brain's age. I think it's something that people usually say, well, that's strange. How could my brain be a different age than me? But our brains age differently depending on those lifestyle factors. A 60-year-old person could have the brain age of someone who's 50. Or conversely, a 60-year-old person could have the brain age of someone who's 70. So then that begs the question, how do we keep the brain young and healthy? And scientists have discovered that there's a certain group of people out there in the world that are very good at keeping their brains young and healthy. Maybe some of you on the call have heard of blue zones. And those are areas around the world where people live longer and they live well. Just to name a few, there's more than these three, but Icaria, Greece, Ogliastra, Sardinia, Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica. They're all populated with people that scientists have dubbed superagers. And they're just people that are in their 80s and beyond that have the cognitive function of someone decades younger. And the question then is it their diet? Is it their activities, the environment? And again, we'll touch on some of those factors a little bit later. What is going right with superagers? But first, we'll take a look at just ways that you can take a stock right now of your brain's own age. So there's a few factors that can help you get a sense of that, right? So, short of going to a neurologist and having them do one of those scans, there's just things that you can look at in your everyday life that can give you an understanding, a sense of your brain's age. So the first is how well you manage your day, right? So it's understandable if you misplace your keys or you forget an appointment from time to time. That's okay. But you want to address signs of increasing forgetfulness, because there's a condition called mild cognitive impairment, which impacts around 12 to 18% of people over the age of 65. And while it's not considered dementia, it can be a precursor. The second way is how well you can remember important information. Recall is a use it or lose it skill. It's almost like a muscle, right? So if we're not using our muscles and staying strong, we get that that atrophy in the muscles. The same goes with the brain. So we want to make sure that we're still learning and that we're still remembering information and we're still challenging ourselves to do that. And one exercise that we talk about is leaving the grocery list at home, right? You write down that grocery list. You've got maybe 10 to 15 items on that list. Leave it behind and go and see how well you can do. Actually, I do it all the time, but inevitably I'll call my wife and I'll say, help me fill in some blanks. I forgot a few things. And she'll say, why didn't you take the list with you? And then I'll tell her, well, it's science. So, and round we go. But if you don't want to kick off, say, a grocery battle per se, there's other techniques to try. One idea is just called repetition and spaced practice, right? Whatever you're trying to learn at work or at home, maybe it's just, you're reading for, just pleasure. Revisit information at spaced intervals rather than, say, cramming everything all in at once. Spacing those review sessions helps transfer information to long-term memory. But whatever it is you choose, whatever activity it is you choose, we recommend that you make learning and remembering information something that's intentional and consistent in your life. The third is how well can I move and maintain balance? Because the fact of the matter is the brain controls your balance. So if your balance is declining, your brain may be as well. And as we age, unfortunately, we typically participate in fewer activities that keep our balance strong. So the advice here is really just to try to stay active, which isn't new advice, right? We've been talking about this as a culture and a society forever, just stay more active. But it's not just about your body health, it's also about your brain health. Number 4 is how fast can I walk? So studies have shown that walking speed is tied to memory function. In fact, we have one study that shows just 9 minutes a day of intense walking. And by intense walking, I mean your fastest walk. 9 minutes of that can dramatically improve memory. Then lastly, how old do I feel? There's a powerful connection between your perspective and healthy aging. Studies, again, have found that those with just a positive attitude towards the aging process have a 50% reduced chance of developing dementia. And those same type of people often participate in activities that make the brain more youthful. So think about these 5 ways that you can get a sense of your brain age now, and keep working on those every day. So the good news is that serious mental decline is not an inevitable part of aging. We see these 2 quotes here that we would consider myths. The first is, Well, that's a normal part of aging. There's nothing I can do. So we want to dispel that myth right away. I did mention that, there's 12 to 18% of folks over the age of 65 that have that mild cognitive impairment. But in general, that mental decline is not inevitable. So if you're doing the things that you can do to keep your brain healthy, memory loss shouldn't be something to expect. And the other we've already touched on is that, well, someone in my family has it, so I'm slated to get it at some point as well. And we already know from several studies that that's also not true. So now the next section that we talk about is really the importance of brain health. And before we get ultimately into the importance of brain health, I'd like to just walk folks through a couple of slides that give you some background on what we're really talking about when we refer to dementia or Alzheimer's, and basically, what those really mean for us. So first off, this idea of brain trash we want to discuss. So one of the things that makes your brain older or age prematurely is this buildup of this trash. And the trash is essentially toxins. It's the byproduct of all the work your brain cells do. So each of your brain cells, we like to think of those as mini cities, right? Just these bustling, hustling metropolises. And just like a city can get dirty, your brain can get dirty as well, just through the process of living. And it gets filled with waste in the form of leftover chemical reactions. There is just leftover proteins, environmental toxins, old cells that have already died. There's lots of ways that trash builds up. And you can see here on the screen, which is a pretty interesting stat, a 3-pound brain, the average 3-pound brain makes about 5 pounds of trash per year. And the good news is that trash, just like in the city, is normally recycled or flushed out. But if those processes break down, the trash can build up and damage the brain. And when it comes to that process, I had mentioned flush out. I just want to give you a little background on that because it's a very interesting story. Back in 2013, Dr. Macon Niedergard at the University of Rochester was studying how the brain repairs itself, specifically what role sleep played in brain injury repair. So she wasn't studying dementia or Alzheimer's necessarily, but she was studying sleep as it relates to brain injury. And what they found was shocking. It turns out that the brain shrinks down to 65% its normal size during the sleep cycle. And it was further found that the shrinking was in fact a mechanism by which the brain squeezed out the trash, that waste, those toxins from the brain cells into the empty parts of the brain. And then fluid from the spinal cord is plunged into the brain, washing away the debris. So it's pretty amazing, right? We didn't know that up until about a decade ago. You would think we would have known everything about the body's processes, and that's a pretty big process, as it turns out. But we just in recent medical history discovered that. So that flushing of the brain is very important. If it's not working at its best capacity, it could lead to that buildup of the trash we're talking about. So what does that look like? So, okay, that trash is building up. Now, this is in the case of Alzheimer's. You see on the left there, we have a picture of a healthy or normal brain cell, and the neuron is obviously called out there. But on the right, what we have is the buildup of plaques, right? So plaques are deposits of protein fragments. And in this case, we have two different ones. One's called beta amyloid that builds up in the spaces between the nerve cells. And the tangles that we see are twisted fibers of another protein called tau that build up inside the cells. But in both cases, the protein waste stops communication between nerve cells and causes them to die. And it's important to note that while Alzheimer's is one disease that causes cognitive impairment, it's not the only way it can happen. Traumatic brain injury can also have the same effect. Vascular dementia is another example of impairment, but this happens maybe because blood vessels in the brain burst, perhaps due to stroke, which in fact was the situation my grandmother was in. My point is there's a lot of factors in play when it comes to cognitive decline. But can we get rid of this trash? Yes, we just talked about how they've made discoveries that your body has cleaning methods to literally take out the trash. In a bit, when we'll talk about how the body can get rid of that brain trash most effectively. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention the costs when it comes to dementia. And also to clarify, because again, if I'm in person, this question does come up quite a bit, because we use dementia and Alzheimer's almost like they're interchangeable. They aren't exactly. Think of dementia as an umbrella term. Alzheimer's is a form of dementia, but there's also other forms of dementia. I mentioned vascular dementia. There's also Lewy body dementia. So dementia is kind of just an overall term for cognitive disease, and Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. Now, whether we're talking about dementia or Alzheimer's, you have to consider if you're being cared for, there's medications, there's caregiving that either comes to the home, or maybe it's you're in a facility for caregiving, and that includes housing needs. So the costs of cognitive disease can be significant. And in the case of Alzheimer's specifically, those patients live an average of 4 to 8 years, yet some live as long as 20 years. So they're very real ongoing annual expenses to consider when it comes to these. And here's another example of that. So what we have here are annual national average costs. And dementia is a progressive disease, so that's why we have this progression of care slide. And here's what it might look like, just national averages: 61, almost 62,000 for home health aid, 54,000 average for assisted living, and 108,000 average for a nursing home. But when we add memory care, each of those costs could go up from anywhere between $12,000 and $48,000 a year. And so, a lot of people say, well, that's okay. I do have access to Medicare. I have access to Medicaid. And that is true to an extent, but we just want to break down these two options for you. So Medicare doesn't pay for long-term nursing stays. The language says it'll cover up to 100 days of skilled nursing care per illness. And if dementia is that illness, then you have 100 days of coverage. But after that, we're paying out of pocket from then on. And sometimes if you can't pay, you can be discharged, even though there's still a need for care. And while Medicaid may pay for long-term home nursing stays, there's certain Medicaid level of care and financial eligibility requirements. Those vary from state to state, so they may be a hurdle. I'm just saying, with that said, will there be coverage? To a certain extent, yes, but I think it's important for folks to also think outside the Medicare and Medicaid boxes and think, what can you control? What can you save for or prepare for in the future? And with that said, let me just show you this stat, because it's a little eye-popping. The estimated lifetime cost of care for dementia is $392,000, or almost $393,000. And again, just some of those things that may come into it are medical expenses, caregiving, maybe home modifications. And when I say home modifications, think about maybe a wheelchair ramp or a chair that gets you up the stairs, low threshold bathtubs to make sure there's no falls involved. All those things that you might have to modify in the home to make sure you're living there safely. Obviously, loss of income. If your disease reaches a point where you can't work, but you were still of working age, well, now you're going to have a loss of income. Then there's the legal fees to consider, and of course, hospice and end of life care. So, there's lots of things to consider when it comes to this. And I think another way to look at it is it's just another conversation, I think, that you should have with your financial advisor, like every other conversation you have when you're planning for your future, when you're planning for your retirement. There's definite steps that I would recommend, even no matter how old you are. Having the conversation now is perfect timing. And there's just certain things that you can do to prepare for cognitive decline for you or a loved one. And obviously, talking to Timothy, start planning early, or consider long-term care insurance. Consider setting up a trust to protect your assets and ensure that those assets are going to be used to pay for your care. And of course, talk with loved ones so they can provide the support that you need. And the reason that we do all this, the reason that we have this conversation about brain health and the importance of it, I think comes down to, what I just mentioned a second ago. All this time you're preparing for retirement. And bear in mind, our brains do change as we age. There's a certain amount of brain change that we just can't, there's nothing we can do about, at least not yet. The average human brain shrinks by approximately 5% per decade after the age of 40. But again, that's natural. You can still live a rewarding life. The problem is when we compound that issue by not considering the things that are about our brain health that we can control. And as you might imagine, a shrinking, shriveling brain filled with excess brain trash can have a devastating impact on your memory, your focus, your productivity. And after all, what's the goal of retirement? So we've worked our whole lives and we've saved up our money to retire so we can have a high quality life in retirement, so we can travel or we can volunteer, pick up old hobbies, start new ones, maybe even continue to work in some capacity. But imagine how hard any of those things are going to be if you're dealing with that cognitive decline. And that's really the importance of the brain health issue. So again, as I said at the beginning, I hope this is just a nudge in the right direction. Which brings us, I think, to the fun part, right? This is okay. So now we know what's happening in the brain. We know the importance of it. We had a little talk about the financial bit, but okay, how can we age-proof our brain? So the first and the best ally in the goal of age-proofing or even making that brain younger is sleep. We have, you see here on the screen, 90-minute repeating cycles. I think most people, but maybe not all, are aware that we have these sleep cycles. It's about 90 minutes, which include light sleep, deep sleep, and then REM sleep. Deep sleep is the anti-aging, regenerating, rejuvenating body repair phase of sleep. The brain activity slows down significantly, and that's the deep sleep area is when that brain flush happens and we wring out that brain trash. So you want to get as many of these 90-minute cycles per night, and you want to get as many of those brain flushes per night. So what is recommended is about 7 to 9 hours per sleep. That's the sweet spot. There are a rare group of people who can function at high levels with significantly less sleep, but it's only about 1% of the population. So if you're not fitting it, if you're not one of those 1%, then you're going to need 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. And we already touched on those physical changes. That's, again, the shrinking of the brain and the flushing out. So how do we ensure that we get good sleep? So here's 3 ways, the 3 best ways to ensure it. One is sleep in true darkness. And I tell a story about most people have heard of Pete Sampras, but if you haven't, Pete Sampras is a legendary tennis player, and he traveled obviously all the time to tennis tournaments, and he carried with him a roll of black masking tape. But it wasn't for his racket. It wasn't for injuries. It was to every time he got in a hotel room, he closed the blinds, and if he saw any light coming through the blinds, he covered it up, or any other ambient light in the room. And I think, Timothy, you're kind of referring to this, late at night, you're still looking at your tablet before you go to bed. But even after you go to sleep, how many people sleep with their phone beside them? Right? And how many times a night does the phone, after one notification or another, go off and that light comes on? You may be asleep and you may not notice it, but that might interrupt your sleep cycle. In fact, I've seen it personally. Again, my wife and I, we're guilty of that. We would put our phones next to our beds, and I was still up and she had already fallen asleep, and I saw her phone go off and the light come on, and I saw her stir from her sleep just because of that light hitting her eyes. So it's true, folks. The more dark, the more true darkness that you can sleep in, the better sleep you're going to get. So back to my point about Sampras is that even before scientists had said, yes, this is true, Sampras was doing that. He was making sure that there was as little light as possible in his room. And obviously, he's a championship tennis player, so I'm going to take his word on it that true darkness was helpful to him. The other one is chill out for better sleep. I know this one works for me as well. I don't like to toss and turn when it's a warm night. So whatever it takes to make sure your room is as cool as possible, that is very helpful to sleeping and very helpful for reaching that deep sleep stage where the brain trash gets taken out. And then the third is get some natural light early. Basically, the way to look at this is we start preparing for our next night's sleep by getting outside into natural light first thing in the morning. So if you go outside and spend 10, 15 minutes outside every morning, you're setting your brain timer that counts down until sleep again. So, get out, walk the dog, go check the mail, take a stroll around the block, whatever it is. But as soon as you wake up, try to get outside and get that natural light. It's very helpful for sleep. Over the years, I've heard people ask the question, well, what if I do wake up? Well, don't really worry about waking up. In fact, we wake up at the end of every 90-minute cycle. We may not remember it, but we do. When that recycle sets, there's a quick wake up. But even if you do wake up and you wake up fully, we would just say avoid looking at the clock or start thinking about tomorrow's due list. Just remind yourself that you've simply finished one of those cycles and now it's time to get on to the next one. So here's the second way you can age-proof your brain, and it's all about what you eat, right? You are what you eat, and so is your brain, it says. It's interesting. There's 500 million neurons in your gut, and they are constantly communicating with your brain. So essentially, as your brain goes, as your gut goes, I should say, that's how your brain goes. So think about the foods you're eating and that communication between your gut and your brain. If you're eating foods that affect your mood, your sleep, your brain health, if you're eating foods that are causing inflammation in the gut, all of that information is transferred to the brain. That inflammation can be transferred to the brain. So obviously, your diet does play a very important role in your brain health. So we pull this slide up, and I think right away people see this slide, and it triggers something, and they know kind of what this is. And if we go through all the research about diets and we cut through all the diet noise out there, what you're seeing here on the screen is basically a Mediterranean type diet. That is the best diet out there for brain health. Remember those, I mentioned the blue zones, right? And the two that I mentioned, where were they? They were in Icaria, Greece, and Oglistrada, Sardinia, two obviously Mediterranean areas. So it's obviously working for the folks in those communities if that's where those super agers are. So at the top left, fish, very important to the diet, but we're talking about cold water fish. So salmon, herring, mackerel, cod, trout, tuna. If you're going to cook with oils, make sure it's extra virgin olive oil. Fruits and vegetables, we've always known how important they are, but we would just say make sure that you're getting your fair share of those. Make sure that kind of looks like a rainbow, as many colors as you can get. There are some nuts that are good for the diet. Walnuts, pine nuts, pistachios, and almonds, which works out great for me. I love pistachios. And then you've got beans down there on the bottom left, red kidney beans and pinto beans. What to avoid? And let me preface this. I'm not telling you that you have to change everything about the way that you eat. But just make sure you're getting your fair share of these things. And hopefully, as your habits change over time, maybe it's more of these things than what you're eating now. But if you're looking for things to avoid, it's processed meats, it's starchy carbohydrates like potatoes. But sweet potatoes do fall on the good side of things as far as the carbohydrate is concerned. Also, sugary snacks and preservatives. There's actually a funny story around that. So there is an unwrapped Twinkie that's been on display in Chicago's Museum of Science and Technology since 2009. And it looks amazing, right? It looks delicious. It's good enough to eat, and it's been out there since 2009. So the additives, the preservatives that keep foods like Twinkies from spoiling can obviously wreak havoc on our gut. And as I said, you don't have to swear off Twinkies forever, but I just thought it's important information to know that there's a Twinkie that's still thriving, unwrapped since 2009. And proceed as you will. I always say this to folks, I'm from Philadelphia. I think I'd mentioned that to a few people that jumped on earlier. I'm going to keep continuing to eat cheesesteaks and enjoy cheesesteaks. But, it's just, I have changed my habits, right? I'm just trying to add more of these foods to my diet and be proactive about keeping the brain young. The next way is stress. This one usually surprises people. People say, no.
Excuse me, Dennis.
Yes. Sure.
I have a question on the first two and how they're related. Did the study also look into when you need to stop eating at night so that you can sleep better? So, food and sleep, timing of your eating or stopping eating before sleeping.
That study didn't in particular, but I've read other things about, fasting also being a very important part of our health, our gut health, our overall health. So, I can't quote anything from the study, unfortunately, but I can say this: the more, if you have let's say you don't eat for 12 hours, there's different fasting intervals, but 12 hours seems to be the one that most people go with. So let's say you have dinner at 7 p.m. Yeah, the fasting would suggest that you shouldn't have anything more than, say, 50 calories. After 50 calories, you kind of reset the fasting clock. Or I should say the fasting gauge. So you can have something, you can have some tea, have some water. That won't stop the fasting cycle. But if you're going to fast for 12 hours from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., that seems manageable for most people. And I think that's shown all kinds of health benefits. But again, not that this is connected to this study, unfortunately.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, the stress, as I was saying, stress, most people hear about stress and they think, oh, there's no way that stress is good. We've been hearing it for years. And it's true that some stress is bad, but there is some good stress. And it's really beneficial stress is manageable and it occurs in bursts or in a moment. So, and when that happens, it's another way that we clean up brain trash. It turns on a program that we call autophagy. And autophagy cleans up old and dead cells and removes waste and toxins, just like the brain flush that we talked about. So think of a challenge you want to tackle or something that makes you nervous. That's the type of stress that grows new brain cells. And the example I like to use is skydiving, right? So that's definitely a burst of stress. And if you've done it, but by all accounts, people feel amazing afterwards. Now, I haven't been personally skydiving. I just know people that have, and it's always in the end for them a positive experience. But even if that's too extreme an example, and I believe I get it that it might be, but think of other things that you can do, maybe a little less stressful or a little less exciting than skydiving. But when you start a new job or you're going on vacation, you learn a new hobby. All of those short-term challenges provide the right kind of stress that can boost happiness. And if you're boosting happiness, you're minimizing and lowering anxiety, depression, pain symptoms. But I did mention there are the bad stresses. So like worrying over an extended period of time, that produces unhappiness and anxiety. And that can lead to depression and poor health habits. So we want to just provide a few ideas to help manage that bad stress. So here we have basically 3 exercises. I think the overarching theme of these 3 exercises is mindfulness. They're all mindfulness exercises. So we have the breathing exercise. When you're worrying about the past or even the future, it's good to just become present and stay in the moment. And one way to do that is this breathing exercise where you breathe in through the nose and you exhale through the mouth. You say to yourself or out loud if you want to, breathe in calmness, breathe out anxiety, right? So you breathe in the calmness through your nose and you exhale the anxiety through your mouth. And just this exercise can, again, get you kind of out of that cycle of worrying about what happened in the past or what might happen in the future. How about change your perspective? 2 people may experience the same stressful situation, but have very different responses. Stress can actually be quite useful, and you can train your brain to view that stress in that useful light. So I think of, again, what I do. I get up in front of crowds, and that could be a very anxious moment. And I would think of all the things that could go wrong, which is the anxiety. But now I understand that the anxiety and the excitement are basically the same emotion, right? They're just 2 sides of the same coin. So instead of thinking what could go wrong, I just change my perspective and I think of what's going to go right, meaning I get to impart knowledge to people. I get to meet new people. I get to see new places when I travel and help people there. So that's just a better perspective, and it changes that anxiety into excitement. And then the third is the rosebud thorn method, which is essentially another mindfulness technique where you just think of the best thing that happened in the last 24 hours. That's your rose. Then you think of the most challenging part of the previous 24 hours, which is the thorn. And now you think of something specific you're looking forward to in the next 24 hours. So that's the bud and hopefully the new rose. And it's just an effective way to manage stress and boost happiness and kind of get out of those ruts of negative thinking. Get moving is the next way you can age-proof your brain. Essentially, what Dr. Milstein said, if there was a drug that generated the brain benefits that exercise produces, people would be lined up a mile long trying to obtain it. So one study in particular, Cardiff University found that simply by walking 30 minutes a day, you could lower the risk of dementia by 65%. And those 30 minutes don't even have to be done consecutively. Think about just going out for 3 10-minute walks at different intervals during the day, you know, like I'd mentioned when you wake up to start that sleep clock. And then just 2 more times, maybe after lunch, maybe after dinner. 30 minutes a day, reduce risk of dementia by 65%. As for memory, a study published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease investigated 2 groups of adults 60 and older. One group did a year of aerobic exercise, and the other group just stretched. The group that did aerobic exercise showed a whopping 47% average increase in memory scores after that year, while the stretching group really didn't see a noticeable improvement in memory at all. So just get moving, whatever that is for you, and make sure you're staying active. And think of all the things that we've already mentioned, right? Restarting that sleep clock. But I also mentioned how walking improves memory and lowers the risk of dementia. So there's really no reason that if we're able to, that we're not getting out there and just moving even a little bit per day. Now, when it comes to exercise, I think most people say, yeah, I get it, right? We know that exercise is important. Maybe I just learned that it's good for my brain, but it's always been a struggle anyway to keep on that exercise track, because there's always things in my life that are kind of distracting me away from an exercise habit. So here's just a little way to kind of hopefully make it a habit, and it's using the CARS method, C-A-R-S. C is cues, right? When it comes to making exercise a habit, we have to have these visual cues that prompt us to do the exercise. You see this picture here, a picture of shoes in front of the front door. So that kind of will spur you to remember to take that 10-minute walk. But it's funny, just a week ago, I was out doing this with a group of people in person, and a guy came up to me and said, it was, great presentation, great information. But when you did that part about the shoes, my wife gave me the elbow. She said, you're not leaving your shoes in front of the door. She's like, it took me all this time to make sure he's picking up his shoes. He's not going to start putting them in front of the door now. So whatever that cue is, as long as it's not causing trouble at home, I would say definitely do that. Actions. Make sure that you're just doing things that leave you really almost no excuse not to exercise. And the simple action that we talk about is when you go to the store, the grocery store, or the mall, wherever it is, park further away on purpose. Just get extra steps in from the door to the car and back and forth. Reward. Do something you enjoy, because the exercise has to be fun. I don't love running or jogging for that matter. So I'm not going to pick that. I'm not going to pick something that I'm not going to be incentivized to do. So whatever it is that you choose, make sure it's something that you love to do. My wife and I play tennis with some friends once a week if we can, maybe every 2 weeks. But the point is we get out there on a regular basis and we're moving our bodies. So, and that kind of, in my case, connects to the last one, which is support, meaning we have this couple that we play some tennis with. They keep us honest, right? They're kind of our accountability partners in making sure that we get out and play tennis. So make sure that you have some support. Find that workout buddy. Which brings us to cross-training the brain. We've already talked about that nightly brainwash, that spinal fluid, and we talked about the autophagy that occurs when we have that good stress. The third way that we can help wash those toxins out of the brain is norepinephrine. And that is something that is produced by the brain when we learn new things. So keep cross-training your brain. And what I mean by that is, crossword puzzles, brain games, they're really great. And keep doing those if you are doing those. They kind of fit into that memory piece that I had mentioned earlier, and about just recall and exercising our learning and recall muscles. But by cross training, we mean learn something new. Go out there and do something you haven't done before. Or if you love to read, what I would say is, in my case, I read history books, and World War II is kind of my lane. But me reading another World War II book isn't what we're talking about. I should get a book and read about learning French, for example, something completely different. And that's what we mean, challenging the brain, because when you do that, it adds myelination, which is basically a coating around your brain cells that helps electrical signals travel faster. And it allows us to get better at tasks. And learning things that are especially difficult. I mentioned a new language or maybe a musical instrument, as we see in the photo on the slide. That's really good for your brain. So get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Keep challenging yourself on new things. So try different physical activities, learn a new song, try your hand at that new language, read a book on a subject you're not familiar with, and remember to keep your social calendar pretty much booked. Socializing with friends, meeting new people, all of these things can help cross-train the brain. So bringing it home here, there's the slide wasn't always in here, but we did start to add it because we would get a lot of questions about supplements, because people would hear either from a commercial or maybe from a friend that they were taking a new supplement that was specific to brain health. And we can keep it short and sweet. The fact of the matter is that the marketing of supplements is way ahead of the science. So we don't have enough data to say, yes, here's the supplements that you should or should not use. And in this case, we just recommend talking to your doctor, because they're going to have information. Maybe it's a supplement is right for you and not somebody else for whatever reason. So, just advise your doctor, take the advice of your doctor. So just as a quick recap, we talked about your age versus your brain's age. There's ways to keep it younger. We talked about that importance of brain health, specifically your quality of life as you age, but also the financial factors that come into it. And then, of course, we just talked about the ways that you can keep that that brain young and healthy over time. So our next steps, we would suggest, just starting with, think about this quote, which is, a sharp mind into older age isn't just a bit of luck, it's within reach for most of us. So as a next step, we would just challenge you, right? We would challenge you to, if you don't already have a copy of this, we'll make sure that you do get a copy, but get a copy of the workbook and think about those areas that we talked about: sleep, diet, stress, exercise, learning. We're not saying tackle them all at once, but as a next step, just pick one of them. Start working on getting better at one, like, getting to sleep at a good hour, making sure that you're in as much darkness as possible, and that you're giving your brain the best chance possible every morning to stay young and healthy. And of course, talk to your advisor about those financial issues that we talked about that may impact you or loved ones as time goes on. And I'll stop there, Timothy and Rose. Thank you for the time, but obviously we've got a little bit of time left. I'm open to any other questions that anyone on the call may have.
Sounds good, folks. Definitely looking forward to any questions, and I'll make sure to get a copy of the workbook and email it out to everyone who registered for the webinar. Questions, folks?
Well, I will say this: if there's no questions, there's one other, I guess, topic that's not in the presentation. It may be at some point, because it comes up a lot, and we're always trying to update this and make it as information as possible. But someone did ask us once about hearing loss. So I think it's worth noting that since then we looked up some results that Dr. Mark Milstein was able to give us. And if you are having trouble with hearing, it's also something that you should keep an eye on, because mild hearing loss can increase dementia risk by 2 times. Moderate hearing loss can increase the risk by 3. And severe hearing loss can increase the dementia risk by 5. So again, if it's yourself, or if you're not dealing with hearing loss, but you do have loved ones that are, it's definitely something that should be addressed, because we've seen those effects on brain health.
That certainly makes sense, Dennis. I think about mother-in-law who refused to wear her hearing aids, and frequently missed conversations and became more isolated, even though there were 3 others of us here in the family in the house. And, certainly we didn't want to shout. That wouldn't be appropriate, but
Right.
it's a challenge. She has dementia that doesn't feel that the hearing aids are comfortable. And yeah, it just compounds and becomes a cycle.
Sure.
Yeah, good question, Allison. I've thought on that one. Even though, the days are shorter, I still get out. I guess it's dark when I go out walking with the dog, but for me, it's just jump starting the day. Sort of a must do in my routine. And then I try to get out several other times during the day. Anything else, folks? If not, you will be getting an email with the workbook. Make sure everybody gets that. And let me just double check the chat box. We're good there. Okay. Anything last, folks? Nope. All righty. Oh, it looks like Rose has a question.
Well, this is really helpful and interesting. Thank you, Dennis. We have come across in terms of managing stress that I think is useful is identifying all the negative thoughts that sometimes face us during our waking hours, and that is that identify it as stinking thinking. I don't know if anyone here has heard of that. And if that might be of interest, we can invite for the next month's First Friday 401k, unless Timothy has scheduled something else, that this could be a great follow-up topic where we identify when we have that stinking thinking, and then be able to isolate it so that it does not become such a stressful thing that it gets us down and really would affect our health as well. And so I would recommend that. And because for me, just knowing about stinking feeling or stinking thinking, which leads to stinking feeling in the past month or so, has been really helpful, especially since I'm running for office and I'm faced with unfamiliar situations.
A good point. I'll reach out to Dr. Judith Wright and see if she's available to join us for the First Friday talk in November. And all right, folks. Yeah, First Friday in November will be after the election, so please make sure you get out there and vote. That's an important reminder for all. All right. Thank you very much, folks. You have a good day. Take care now.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you, Dennis. Bye now.